Today I want to talk to you all about a very serious issue, and it's something that has been very close in my heart for a long time. It's been in the news a lot recently, and a lot of politicians have been talking about it as well. I want to talk to you about how we can all save the world using beer and toilet paper. Now, beer and toilet paper are my day job, and it's every frat boy's dream. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about how I've ended up here doing what I do. Now, this all started with me coming to university in Melbourne, and as an engineering and an economics student, it didn't take me too long to figure out that it was actually cheaper for me to spend my holidays in Asia than it was to stay in Australia. So I spent about 4 months of every year travelling, living, volunteering in different parts of Asia. And towards the end of my degree, I started to think about what it was that I actually wanted to do for a career, I guess like most students do. I loved problem solving, I was big on innovation, and markets were a true passion for me. So I thought working at somewhere like McKinsey would be awesome. Now, I harassed them on the phone, I went through job interviews, and after about a 2-year gestation period, they offered me a job. And this was one of the best days of my life. I was incredibly over the moon. But having that offer there in front of me on the table gave me the headspace to sort of stop and think about what my life had meant up to that point. And I realised that McKinsey ticked all of the boxes on problem solving, innovation and markets. But there was this incredibly strong pull back into the developing world. And what had occurred to me was that I wanted to solve problems that were social problems, not just business problems. So after really thinking about this and making an incredibly tough decision, I turned my dream job down and I moved to South Africa, where I worked on the ground with a development aid organisation. And it was great. I was now immersed in a job that allowed me to achieve outcomes that I was really, truly, deeply believing in and passionate about. But the work itself wasn't that enjoyable. I found I wasn't challenged, and I found that the impact that I could have was limited to just a few people that I was working with each day. So I started thinking about what to do next. And at this point, I realised that I'd been in the developing world on and off for about 10 years. And I'd seen a lot of the poverty that you guys have no doubt heard about. The 884 million people without access to clean water, the 759 million illiterate adults, and the 2.4 billion people without access to decent toilets. Like you, I'm sure you've seen these numbers a million times before, just as I had. And they've lost meaning. They don't really mean that much because they've been thrown around in front of us and touted. But what did have meaning was when I realised that over that decade I'd been in the developing world, I hadn't visually observed any difference in the level of poverty in front of my eyes, and that was a bit disconcerting. As an economist, I started thinking about the numbers. I said, we're doing stuff to change this. I've seen people working on solutions. What's actually happening? And looking at that 759 million illiterate adults figure, I found that we'd improved adult literacy by about 100 million in that same decade, which is great. We've done a lot. We should pat ourselves on the back. But if we extrapolate that out, continuing to improve at this same rate means that we're not going to see a globally illiterate planet until about 2085. And doing the same analysis on sanitation means that we won't achieve global sanitation until about 2080. I'm 28, I'm not going to be alive to see either of those two things happen. And I think that's pretty shocking. We're leaving these problems for the next generation. Now, when we're working with social problems like poverty, I think there's a pretty simple solution or equation that we can use to solve problems like this. We need to have a solution, but we also need the capital to fund that solution to make everything work. I've seen a lot of solutions in my time, and admittedly, some of them are much better than others. But pretty much all solutions seem to suffer from the same problem, which is that they're underfunded or find it difficult to get the capital they need. So this is what I want to go a bit into today. This capital for social problems is generally philanthropic in nature. So before we go any further, I want you all just to stop for a second and think about what image comes into your head when I say the word philanthropist. If you're like most people I've spoken to, you're probably thinking of a clean-cut white male in a suit, or someone like Warren Buffett or Bill and Melinda Gates, who've pledged to give away 90% of their fortune before they die. The link that you're making is that philanthropy is for affluent individuals. And I don't think this is quite correct. If we stop and actually have a look at giving in Australia to the 12 months ending January 2005, which is the most recent data that we have, we see that total charitable giving was around about $11 billion. Taking away corporate donations and foundations, we're left with everything from individuals. 45% of that total $11 billion comes from non-affluent individuals, or individuals who are earning less than $100,000 a year. And the remainder, the 20% coming from affluent individuals, is made up of those individuals earning more than that. And this picture is pretty similar around the world. Looking at the United States in 2008, typically touted as the home of philanthropy, we see that giving was estimated to be about $307 billion. Again, taking away corporations and foundations, we're left with individuals, and we see a pretty even split, 40% coming from non-affluent individuals and 40% from affluent individuals. So this assumption that philanthropy is for affluent individuals isn't quite right. Instead, philanthropy is coming from a small number of affluent individuals and a large number of everyone else. Let's call them the everyday Joe. So, if we're going to increase philanthropy, we either need to be targeting the affluent individual, like the Bill Gates, and trying to find another Bill Gates. Or we can flip that and we can target the everyday Joe and try to increase the amount that the everyday Joe is giving. To give you an idea of the scale of impact this could have, let's have a look at the American Joe. If we get the American Joe to give $250 more a year, then we end up creating about the $80 billion that Bill Gates is thought to be giving away before he dies. But we do this every single year. Now, that $250 might sound like a lot, but this is less than 1% of the average Joe's income. And it's going to increase American philanthropy by about 25% each year. So it's a pretty impactful way of thinking about this. The question is, how do we get the everyday Joe to give more? I think there's a pretty simple solution to this. It's beer and toilet paper. Now, I know what you're thinking. This guy's crazy. There's no way you can arithmetically add beer and toilet paper. You're right. I guess what I'm thinking is that we need to wrap the donations that we're making into our purchases of goods that we want, like beer, and goods that we need, like toilet paper. The idea is that we're taking something we do every single day, consumption, and we're making it better by donating the profit from each of those purchases. We're turning consumers into philanthropists. I call this concept consumer-driven philanthropy, and I think there's three things we need to do if we're going to make this work. First of all, you can't sell a low-quality product. Secondly, you need to make sure that you're not charging an excessive price premium. And thirdly, you can't motivate a sale with guilt. To test this idea of consumer-driven philanthropy out, I've spent the last 3 years working to set up a non-profit bar called Shebeen. The idea behind Shebeen is that we sell beers and wines from the developing world, and the profit from each sale is directed back to an organisation in that drink's country of origin. So if you have a Kenyan beer, say a Tusker, you're helping to provide agricultural equipment to a small farmer in Kenya. Now, the name itself, Shebeen, comes from the speakeasies of South Africa, which sprung up during the apartheid era. But this Shebeen is going to be right here in Melbourne. And we think of it as being win-win, because now consumers can make a difference by thinking about where they go for a drink. And our beneficiary organisations are tapping into a previously inaccessible pool of funds. And it's from a non-traditional audience, because your regular bar goer isn't someone who's supporting Kenyan farmers on an annual basis. The question is this just a harebrained scheme, or is it something that actually works? And over the last 2 years, we've tested this idea out by selling our products in 5 different venues around Melbourne. This is our Ethiopian beer on sale at Madame Brussels, where we've consistently seen it as one of their top 5 selling products. All of the venues have been donating $1.50 back to us from each product sale to help us get started. Seeing that demand was strong, we wanted to take this a step further. So last year in November, we opened up a full-service temporary pop-up bar in Melbourne City and traded for 4 days. Over those 4 days, we had more than 1,500 people through our doors, and we overshot the revenue projections of our permanent venue by almost 100%. So it's looking good, which is what brings us to our model, our financial model. Now, like a regular company, we earn profits, and those profits are our revenues less our expenses. We have to pay our staff, we pay our rent and our cost of goods, just like everyone else. Once we've got our profit, we hold on to 15% for growth, and we pay out 85% to our beneficiary organisations. Over the first 12 months of operations, we think we should be able to pay out about $200,000, and that figure should increase to around $800,000 in the first 3 years in total. So it looks pretty good on paper. But the problem is, this is just one venue, and as a single shop front, it's very difficult to hit the everyday Joe. It's the same problem that most social businesses will face, so we had to innovate to think about how we could increase our reach. We've now raised enough capital to open our first venue in Melbourne. From there, we'll look to expand out our bar partnerships, hoping to get our product into 25 to 35 venues over the first 12 months, before looking to move geographically by opening a second or a third venue interstate or overseas. After that, we're hoping to tap into the retail market with a Shebeen co-branded microbrewed beer that's non-profit, or maybe a uniquely aged spirit that you can buy in bottle shops. After that, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. But I'm not here to talk to you about just beer. That would be ridiculous. I'm here to talk to you about beer and toilet paper. So, toilet paper started to come into this equation when I was thinking, how do we improve Shebeen? How do we make this idea even better? And it occurred to me that Shebeen's weakness is that we can't reach everyone. Because not every Joe drinks, and not every Joe wants to drink a South African wine or an Ethiopian beer. We need to find a product that touches everyone. Which is exactly what toilet paper does. So now I'm working to create a toilet paper company that sells environmentally friendly toilet paper here in Australia and uses its 50% of its profits to build toilets in the developing world. The product itself is called Who Gives a Crap? With a little bit of research, I realised that this was going to work pretty clearly for 3 reasons. First of all, the market size is huge, bigger than Julia Gillard, Oprah. It's even bigger than beer. Second of all, we've got incredible comparative advantage compared to existing brands in the space who are focused on puppies, pillows, and feathers. By being fun and attitude heavy, and actually innovating the product for the first time in 50 years, we're hoping to make ourselves the Ben & Jerry's of the toilet paper space. Thirdly, my research showed our product is highly marketable. We have 1,200% more puns than our competitors. So, we're obviously having a lot of fun with this product, but the business case itself is actually incredibly serious. With just 1% of the Australian market, we're able to generate profits of $350,000 and provide toilets to 150,000 people on an annual basis. So it makes a lot of sense. But we're still in concept development. We're hoping to roll this out in the next few months. So until then, keep your eyes open. Now, you're probably thinking, I get it, beer and toilet paper, it all makes sense now. But what does this mean for me? Really, that depends on who you are, whether you're a business, a non-profit, or an individual. For businesses, what I'm saying is that the game is changing. Consumers used to place value on the intersection of price and quality, but now, increasingly, consumers are looking for products that do good. So you need to think about how you can make your product sit at the intersection of these 3 circles. I like to think about this goodness circle as being something that can be broken down into 3 parts. The green good, which is like your Toyota Prius, the social good, like Shebeen, Who Gives a Crap, or the personal good, which we can break further into our organic and natural, or something that creates a unique consumer experience or relationship, like when you purchase something from a farmer market from the person who grew it. The consumer-driven philanthropy I've touched on today moves into these social good and unique personal experience categories, but we can use it to capture almost that entire goodness circle. That's why the power of consumer-driven philanthropy has seen this concept move out of the startup space with companies like Warby Parker, who are doing buy one, give one eyewear in the United States, and into some of the biggest companies in the world, like Coca-Cola, whose Dwala mango smoothie is using its profits to support Haitian farmers, and Panera Bread, who have close to 1,500 stores in the United States, and recently opened Panera Cares, which is their non-profit pay-what-you-want store, helping to provide food to people who can't afford it. And finally, Louis Vuitton, who recently did an Eden collaboration bag with the profits supporting African development projects. I think this campaign's got a little bit further to go, but it's pretty impressive to see someone like Louis Vuitton having a crack at consumer-driven philanthropy. Now, if you want to incorporate consumer-driven philanthropy into your business, the key thing is that you can't market using guilt. Instead, you need to be marketing based on the measurable impact that you're creating, and you have to be accountable and transparent. You need to be marketing the solution and not the problem. For nonprofits, this means that your revenue sources are changing. Now you can be thinking about how to incorporate consumer-driven philanthropy into your company, or how you target companies that are introducing it themselves. But remember, these companies are marketing the solution and not the problem, which means that you need to sell them on the solution yourself. As a result, you need to be investing in making sure your impact is measurable and you know how big it is, and you have to be accountable and transparent. Hopefully this means that you can spend less on your marketing and fundraising at the same time. Finally, for individuals, consumer-driven philanthropy is putting the power back into your hands. But until we have a social seal equivalent to that of organic or fair trade, you have to do some research to make sure that you're supporting products and causes that make sense. I think that we need to be thinking about every single dollar that we spend to make sure that we make both the wants and the needs count. And really, that's how we collectively can save the world using beer and toilet paper. To that I say, bottoms up to a better world. Thank you.